Welcome back to the Satoshi Chain. My name's Adam, and today I want to talk about a few things in crypto. I've been away for a little bit, talking with people, enjoying the summer, and I'm back now. So I've had a few conversations with a few people in the crypto space, and continuing where we left off at the crypto conference. A lot of people don't understand Bitcoin, and I feel like I do to some extent. I feel like I've done a lot of research, and I'm going to try to impart that on you. So this is going to be an apologetics for Bitcoin. So apologetics means the kind of rhetorical defense of some belief system or ideology. And even though I believe it's important to question all of our ideologies and to not have dogma, I believe everything I'm going to tell you now is based off of research and not dogma, and is falsifiable basically. So we can see if things fail and the crypto Bitcoin network fails, that'll be fine. First is how to value Bitcoin. So I've had a lot of people kind of ask me, these very smart people, they're very smart and studious people, who are asking me, how can you value Bitcoin? It's not a stock, it doesn't have cash flow going in, cash flow going out. I only understand valuation in one singular way, or a myriad of ways, and Bitcoin doesn't fit into that system, so I just don't understand how to value it. I'm not saying it's valueless, it's just I can't value it, and therefore I refuse to engage in it, and I dislike it as any sort of asset to own and to gamble on. So the first thing is the Bitcoin network is going up in terms of wallet addresses and kind of use on the network and the hash power of the network, the amount of miners who are on the network mining, and the obviously as a result the price action has gone up, and it's gone up for 15 years. And I think the best way to value Bitcoin is through a theoretical understanding of what is money and what Bitcoin is trying to do. I'm going to discuss the nature of Bitcoin later. I've discussed it many times on the channel. I will discuss it again. But in the end, it's a conversation about Bitcoin as a theoretical entity, as a base layer of monetary system. But beyond that, I want to talk about fiat currency. How would you value fiat currency? And I would say that fiat has done amazing things. It's necessary for a global economy. It's necessary for providing kind of infinite liquidity, and for backstopping banks when they extend themselves too far, and for allowing the government to extend itself too far in multiple ways, and to kind of backstop a whole bunch of programs and initiatives. Of course, we're seeing the consequence of that, infinite money printing and kind of debt asset creation, which is that you have to pay your debts on these exceedingly large sovereign state debts, and the U.S. is now at 37 trillion, and I'm sure it'll keep going up indefinitely, as there's no way to reverse that. How would you value the fiat system? So let's assume, I think correctly, that fiat system has allowed for a modern economy, and so has allowed for a multitude of expansions in the economy, that there's been innovation and initiative and wealth creation in a way like we've never seen before, as a function of the fiat system. But how would you value the unit, the network itself? Because it doesn't have cash flows in and out. All it has is the consequence of the network. The network existing has resulted in these companies existing, in these financialization of certain assets. But the network itself is not necessarily producing any value. I don't know if you're talking about the SWIFT network or something, like payment of fees. It's not the main value creation part of the network. It doesn't have a board of directors or a CEO, and I guess it's got the state treasury or something like that, but it changes over time. It's not consistent. I'm just confused as to how you would value fiat currency, but I think everyone would agree it's been extremely valuable. It's been extremely valuable. It has allowed for a magnitude of economic activity to occur. And so you ask me, how would you value Bitcoin? And I'm saying, look, maybe it's the same thing. This is a base fundamental layer, a primitive in the economic layer. So you can't value it like a stock, right? So that's just food for thought. Let me tell you directly that if you're trying to value Bitcoin as a company, the cash flows in, the cash flow out, the 5-year roadmap from the CEO, the experience of the board of directors, it doesn't have that. So if you feel like the only way that things things have value is through that method, or the only way that you can come to understand value is through understanding those things, then Bitcoin will forever be unintelligible to you, and there's no way that you should ever think of it as having value, because your system of what it means to have value would preclude something like Bitcoin. But I'm just trying to get you to appreciate also, you would also have to preclude the fiat system, like a monetary technology that is the fiat system. And I think that's ridiculous. I think, of course, it has value. And it's very easy to start describing how it has value. But in terms of how you would value it, how you would value a slice of the fiat system, I don't know how you would. And let me add to this point that unlike in the fiat system, where you can't directly own a piece of that monetary technology, you can't invest directly in the central bank or directly in the country. The only way that you can invest in either directly into the network or some kind of very close proxy for the network is through the stock market or through regional and national banks, right? Like that's the only way. You're not directly owning the network. With Bitcoin, you can directly own that network, which is kind of insane. So if you think of all the innovation that's come across from the fiat network, and you think about how a lot of that value has actually been captured by the nation state because it's creating more and more debt assets, and that money it is going places and going, but it's not going to you. You're not able to be a part of that. Most people are not able to buy bonds and treasuries in meaningful ways, in a corporate way, and have it put against, I don't know, its stock options and be able to issue certain monetary things based off of their stock valuation. You can simply go buy government bonds and treasuries, and you can lose your purchasing power over time. You are unable to leverage that debt creation to get extra value for yourself, extra purchasing power. It seems like with Bitcoin you can. You're not buying a debt asset, you're buying a real asset. The work has already been done for it, and you're purchasing it after the fact, as opposed to purchasing something where the work will have to be done in the future, which is what fiat currency is. And you're able to own that. And you're able to, hopefully in the future, do financialize things around it. You're essentially able to take up a very small sliver of what banks do in the fiat system. And you're able to do that as an individual actor in that system. I think this is astounding. And I'm not sure if this is perfectly true to the Bitcoin vision, but I think it is. And it's just it's a difference in kind. It's not a difference in degree. It's a difference of type. Okay, so my question also is like, how would you, if you could own the transition from, let's say, hard money and gold to fiat currencies, what would that be worth to you, and how much money could you make from that? Most of us were not able to own that transition in any sort of meaningful way. I am proposing, though, that owners of industry are essentially able to benefit from that. So they are, in other words, they are by proxy the owners of the effects of the fiat system. The average working class person is not. With Bitcoin, though, you can change that. So if this new financial layer is actually going to keep growing and expanding, you will be able to capitalize on that in a way that you were not with the financial system, the fiat system. I want to talk about Bitcoin a little bit. So just like, what is Bitcoin? I've described it many times. You can see I'm kind of tired talking about it, but Bitcoin is essentially a superior money. I remember getting into Bitcoin and hearing about it in 2012 and then 2015, and people were talking about it in 2015 in these ways, and I did not understand what they were saying because I did not understand Bitcoin, and I thought that it was a slow dinosaur coin, and it was only brand recognition that made Bitcoin valuable, and surely it would lose its standing to these other altcoins as they show up in these new sexy things, and that has not happened. And that has not happened, my wager is that hasn't happened because I fundamentally misunderstood what Bitcoin's value proposition was, and I think many people do. Even going to that crypto conference I talked about a few months ago, no one understands Bitcoin. And that seems to be somewhat concerning to me. But also, as I tell my girlfriend, there's an information asymmetry right now. There's people who have some sort of sound understanding of what's going on. Whether or not Bitcoin will fail is a different topic, but they've done the research, and they understand the language and the words and the thoughts and the theory that at the end of the day are our best guess at explaining the phenomenon of going from 1 penny to $100,000 and 1 penny to potentially $1 million in 10 years or so. Like there are people who are owning that headspace and entering that and using their intellectual might and rigor to understand, and the vast majority of people are not still. So if you're into crypto and you understand the words that I'm saying in this video and throughout this video, you have an information asymmetry relative to most of the world's population right now, and you can leverage that in markets. Information asymmetries, especially very strong ones, can be very deadly in terms of like you can do a lot of damage there. You can do a lot of good damage. What I'm saying, you can excel quite greatly. This assumes that crypto will work. I can't guarantee that at all, but I think there's reasons to believe that more than ever before. I think we have reasons to believe it is, and I think the risk reward right now for crypto is insanely high. So I think that we've never had a risk reward for crypto like we have in 2024, 2025. So Bitcoin will never move as quickly up as it did in its early days, but the risk was really low, but the reward was really low actually at first, because it was just the speculative bullshit coin. And you didn't take much to get Bitcoin, but you didn't have any idea that it would be worth anything. And now I think is actually the best risk reward. The risk relatively is really low for Bitcoin and crypto. The reward is lower in some ways than it was in the past by several magnitudes, but when you risk reward it out, it's probably the best we've ever going to have in the crypto sphere is probably right now, this inflection point. So when you think about it that way, I don't think you're late. I think that this is actually a really good time to be in crypto, and you have an information asymmetry and a risk reward that's very favorable right now. I'm not saying about specifically this day. I think we're going to reach a peak sometime soon and come crashing down with Bitcoin as we do, but I think overall when we zoom out and look at this in another 30 years, it will be like this was an astounding point where people could become informed. There was enough data about Bitcoin and the theory behind it, and very few people did. So Bitcoin's a superior money system. It's not a currency. It's not fiat, and it's the result of pure energy being transitioned into a value token through a proof of work system. So there is kind of a thermodynamics of Bitcoin. There is where value in the system comes from, and it comes from raw energy. It comes from taking chemical, kinetic, solar, thermal, steam energy, and converting it into a network that runs and secures these tokens. And so you can think of, like the last thing I want to talk about here is government agencies and the idea that governments will never accept crypto. Crypto will fail because governments won't accept it, and governments are going to create their own digital currencies and they're going to compete. And I think that this is a very, very confused view, and it makes absolute sense why people would feel this way when they don't understand what Bitcoin is. So let me put this differently. If money is a trust system that the issuer won't arbitrarily redact your value. They won't arbitrarily tax your value. The system will perpetuate that the government won't collapse. That the people who are maintaining the system, specifically with monetary policy in a fiat system, will be reasonable and will be fair to actors across the system and won't favor some actors over others. Like, there's a lot of trust that goes on. There's a trust that the broader economy will continue to accept the currency, and the international economy will also continue to accept the currency. There's a lot of trust that goes on with currency in general. You are putting your economic effort into a unit of value, and you are assuming that unit of value will not only persist through time, but hopefully if you're an individual actor, it'll go up in time. It won't go down in time in terms of your relative purchasing power. There's a lot of trust in these systems. When people talk to me about the U.S. government, I mean, like, let me ask you in a non-facetious way, but it's going to sound facetious. How much trust will you have in the U.S. government if it continues to go in the direction it's going, and all governments go in this direction, by the way, all fiat issuing governments are going in this direction, when all they do, for the most part, is issue more debt tokens, debt assets, to back their current spending? So their yearly spending, they're always over budget, and so they're creating more debt tokens in order to back that spending. And at some point, and the U.S. is on course for this at $37 trillion debt and counting, the interest payments on those debt assets will be equal to or more than the entire rest of the budget for the country. So just the interest payments on the debt alone. And what is the solution to paying those debt payments? Is to create more debt assets, which will incur even more interest payments. This is actually literally a Ponzi scheme. It is a scheme where you take people's incoming money to cover the initial people or earlier people on the system and perpetuate the system for as long as possible and grow it until it collapses under its own weight. This is called a Ponzi scheme. That's my understanding of how central banking essentially works for all these countries, and it explains why their debt is going on a runaway course. So with that said, why would you trust this system? And if all things were equal, and they're not, Bitcoin is not as quick and as fast, it's slower, but if all things were equal and you had a proof of stake network or something, or a network that had decentralized trust, that the trust was inside of the code of the network and it was split across mutually disinterested actors across the world, and you had access to putting your value and your economic activity into that system, why would you ever choose to put it in a classical system? We've seen the result of these classical systems, these government systems, these fiat systems, these issuers of tokens and government debt. It doesn't seem good. And as a consequence of them running these systems, the wealth gap is exceedingly getting higher and higher, because the system of debt asset printing benefits some actors in the society more than others. So you're looking at this as an individual, as the average kind of middle class person in your society, and you're going, why the fuck would I choose this? So I want to talk about the thermodynamics and the entropy of the system. So all of these monetary systems, if you think about it, they lose energy. They are not self-sufficient in and of themselves. They need further productivity and growth to keep justifying themselves. With Bitcoin, that energy comes from either thermodynamic energy, it comes from steam energy, it comes from kinetic energy, it comes from solar energy, chemical energy. Bitcoin's energy is coming from raw inputs, which you can actually understand. The energy of these other systems is not physical energy, but is taxation energy. It is future debt energy. It is creating these assets and loading up your citizens with debt. It is the British Empire exploiting the rest of the world and growing and growing and growing because it's getting more and more resources and taxing the lands and raping the resources of the lands, for example, India and China. And when that stops, you see what happens when that gets cut off and diluted and diminished. The empire starts collapsing. There is no system that has a homeostasis when it comes to energy, when it comes to monetary systems. And of course, we see all the fiat systems, they're racking up debts precisely because they don't have homeostasis either. They're constantly bleeding energy, and they need energy from outside to be put in. So the question is, what are the consequences of that energy? So with Bitcoin, it's greenhouse gas emission, it's pollution. These are the main problems with the Bitcoin network in terms of, so all fiat networks take energy in order to sustain them because they don't have homeostasis. What is the consequence of the fiat system? Oh, it's clean, Adam, but what is the legacy of colonialism, of slavery, of indefinite taxation, of ruination of the middle class? Is that clean? I don't think it's clean in a way. And right now, the legacy of American economic colonialism, enforcing the use of their currency, of which they are the only sovereign issuers of and policymakers for, and enforcing it on global trade, energy trade. That there's a cost to that. Like, these systems have a cost, and they have a real cost and a real consequence to individuals, both in these countries as well as international individuals. So I think this is the question we have to think about: is what does it cost to maintain your monetary system? None of them have homeostasis. And what are the consequences in terms of humanity, in terms of pollution, in terms of suffering around the world? There is no free lunch when it comes to these monetary systems, apparently. I think that's all I want to talk about today. So I thank you for your time. There's been a few topics on my mind. I would recommend the book Broken Money by Lynn Alden. I think it's a fantastic read. And like I tell many people, if you're not a Bitcoiner and you don't understand the Bitcoiners, and many people in crypto also don't understand them, if you read that book, you will at least be able to understand what the Bitcoiners are saying, and then you can choose for yourself whether or not it's compelling, or whether or not you want to take action, or whether or not you still just trust it and think it's bullshit. But at least become informed first. That's all I'll say. Thanks for watching the Satoshi Chain. My name's Adam, and take care. Bye now.